Hola, ¿qué tal? Muy buen día. Yo soy Caro Hernández. Gracias por estar una vez más aquí en Palabra de Rudolf Steiner. Estoy muy contenta porque hoy tenemos un invitado muy especial. Él es Giorgio Tarditi Spagnoli, es italiano y vamos a hacer la entrevista en inglés porque yo no hablo italiano, él no habla español y yo más o menos hablo inglés, él habla muy bien inglés, así que pues les cuento un poquito de Giorgio. Él es un investigador independiente de la ciencia del espíritu fundada por Rudolf Steiner. Combina el rigor de la investigación científica de la naturaleza con la comprensión del mundo del alma y el espíritu en el hombre y en el cosmos. Es consejero biográfico y naturópata. Es licenciado en Ciencias Naturales y doctor en Ciencias de la Educación con tesis en Psicología Arquetípica y Evolutiva. So, thank you for being with us, Giorgio. Welcome to Palabra.
Thank you, Caro, for inviting me to Palabra de Rudolf Steiner. I'm very happy to be here. Thank you.
That was an honor for us. And well, your biography is so interesting. I mean, you already live a lot of interesting stuffs, and the people can visit your website. It's giorgiotarditi.spagnoli.com,
Yes.
and you are described as a biographical counselor and a naturopath. You are also described as free researcher of the spirit. What does a free researcher of the spirit mean?
So basically, starting from the principle of spiritual science as given by Rudolf Steiner, I basically apply the principle of spiritual science to fields of research in which this has not been done before. So for example, one is naturopathy. So basically I used spiritual scientific principles to investigate naturopathy and to put it in a context that is actually renewed by spiritual science and anthroposophy. So during my academical studies, I always tried to understand what I was going through in terms of as a spiritual process as well as a cognitive process. So basically, this is what it means, that through an act of free will, because I choose to do so, and I somehow I put this ideal towards my research, I try to investigate the fields of knowledge that I come to meet in my life through the light of spiritual science.
Okay, and now I think that the spiritual life is so important for us, and the things that we are living now, in some moments, I think that crush inside us something, and we feel loose, and we feel a lot of afraid, and I think that that is a very important tool for all of us. So, and sadly, I think that when you say something about the spiritual, the people don't want to hear about it, because we don't know what's going on with the human beings. We don't know what are we, how do you say, we don't want to recognize that we are made also, not just our bodies, also our spirit, and that we have to give food or say something like that.
That's true. That's true. And actually, what I do with spiritual science and what spiritual science is supposed to be is a way to again connect to the sacredness of everyday life and reality. So basically, there is no division between what is spiritual and what is material, but they come both together and they become in a sort of interplay one to another. And the spirit goes into the matter and the matter is spiritualized again into spirit. So basically, in this interplay between spirit, matter, and again spirit, the soul of the human being is nourished by this spiritual food. So there is no longer a duality of spirit and matter, but the soul of man can be that soil where all these spiritual plants can grow, thanks to the light of spiritual science on one side, and to what we do in everyday life, in material life. So there is no longer a distinction, in a sense, between what is completely spiritual and what is completely material. So matter can be spiritualized and can return to the spirit through the soul of man. And that is the action of spiritual science. So through spiritual science, we understand that even spirituality can be applied scientifically without doing away with our feelings and the food for our soul. So it's very important that spiritual science, by being correctly applied, becomes something that transforms our perception of everyday life and reality.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And why do you think that the government or the society or I don't know don't be interested into share this knowledge? Because I really appreciate it when I was to the school. Some teacher teach us about Rudolf Steiner and the other philosophers that they are also important for our lives. I mean, I really appreciate it if they say something about the human beings in the school, because when we finish the school, then we realize that the life has a lot of troubles and stuff, and we can find ourselves and we don't know what to do with our emotions, and they're so hard.
Yes, it is so hard. And usually you have been lucky if you've been taught about Rudolf Steiner in school, because usually, at least in Europe, is not touched upon. I mean, it's not even mentioned. Um, it can, but it's very, very rare. It does not happen often. So basically, the thing is that philosophy, which is the love for knowledge, okay, for wisdom, if we want to be very precise, more precise, it, it actually has to be something we apply to life. It does not have be something out of life, like we just want to speculate about life, and so we retreat in ourselves and we do away with the world while we think about the world. We have to bring the love for wisdom into life. In this way, there is no there is the gap that we feel while we learn, for example, at school, and then when we go out in life and we experience life, is no longer felt. So there is a continuity between knowledge and experience of life. And that is, again, very important, as it is actually the continuity of self-consciousness of the human being that goes from pure knowledge to pure experience. So it is very important that we foster and that we help the children to maintain this consciousness through the whole process, from knowledge to experience. And we often hear about people being shocked after they go out in life after school, or even they are traumatized by school because they have such a strict and difficult times there. And when they go in life, they just like to experience and enjoy life as it is. But there is no really a contrast between these two realms of life. And in fact, world of schools try to actually bring this continuity of experience and knowledge in consciousness.
Yeah. Well, before diving a bit deeper into your current work, we want to talk about you a little bit. In your public biography, you say that when you were little, you always wanted to know the history and the origin of things. So maybe following along the same lines of inquiry, would you like to tell us something short about your own history?
Yes, I've been always fascinated by natural, by nature, by natural, all that is natural, okay? So basically the animal, the vegetable, and the mineral kingdoms. So I've been always so much interested in what was going on in nature that I always wanted to know where they come from. Okay, so where does the animal come from, where does the vegetable comes from, and the mineral. So I always ask questions about the history of what nature was about. And my stories were all about the what was going on in nature. Okay, so my mother, for example, I remember that was telling me about the history of life, and so how it developed on earth, so about the past life of our earth itself. And so I always imagined, and I always felt, actually, so it was something that was very close to me, to my heart, was that the earth was a living being. And I had this very strong imagination when I was a kid, and I brought this on through my scientific studies. That is the, if I were to identify one single image that I had in my childhood about my connection to nature, was that I was connected to a living being, and the whole earth was a living being. And still, this is my my perception of everyday life. So that's why then this interest led me to spiritual science.
There's something that, but that is that is special that you're born with, no? That
Yes,
curiosity to know what's going
yes.
on.
Yeah, it was something that was constantly accompanying me. And it was also a feeling of unity. So I could not explain what it was back then. And so I wanted to know what it was and how it came to be. And that's why I kept asking questions about history of life.
You also say that you start to draw.
Hmm. Yes, I started to draw a lot, especially beings of nature, so especially animals. And while drawing, I felt a connection with the being of the animal. So it was another way for me to connect with the animal itself, so with the being of an animal. And through that, I understood that I was able to understand my own feelings. So that's when I understood that by a certain experience, you gain actual knowledge of the inner, of your own inner makeup, your own inner constitution.
That I say, I mentioned that because I think that it's important to let the kids to draw, right?
Yeah, it's very important because drawing is actually even the precondition for writing. So if you learn to write before learning to draw, you basically become more dry. Your soul dries up. You need images in your soul because the images allow you to have a vision that connects the inner part of you with the outside world. So this vision, this imagination, I would say in spiritual scientific terms, is something that can be led out of the human being in the world, and then again the world can give back an image to the inner human being. And so in this way, there is a continuous interplay between the individual human being and the world. And so that's why children have, like, they have to be encouraged to draw and to use the colors, and to use the colors to experience what the color is in their soul.
Yeah, that's. I mean, my daughter all time draw and draw what it's happening in the school and what's happening in house, and she really enjoy it. And it's almost she has 5 years old and love to draw, and I let her.
And I remember that during the during the school, especially in the elementary school, when there was a lesson, I was constantly drawing. I was doodling instead of actually, you know, I was listening at the same time, but I was doodling actually. I was not just listening, but I had to continuously draw something in order to come into that state of mind that I would be able to absorb the knowledge. So I think that is also a way to focus in a sense and to be structured in our own inner makeup, in our own soul.
I do. Well, now that you mentioned that, I used to, when I call with somebody, I used to draw. I don't know the best drawer, but I used to, and talk and
Yes.
also do that. I don't know why.
I think it's a way of connecting to the flow of what is happening. So basically by drawing, you flow into a movement, into an image, and at the same time you get into the flow of listening, for example, of a person at the telephone or a lesson. So it's something that again connects something that is inside of in us to something that is outside.
Oh, that's gorgeous. Well, thank you for the explanation. um, what would you like to share about the second 7 years of your life?
Well, at school, as I said before, I was not very good actually. So always, I, I liked some of the various lessons that I had, but I was not really interested into school per se. So I went to a public school, so it was not a Waldorf school or whatever, and it was just what it was. It was just lessons and homework. But I remember that some of the teachers made a difference. So I think this is also very important, that the teacher love what they teach, and so in some way it's part of their inner makeup as well, inner soul. So basically they can bring out something of their own life during the lessons. So I think that is the most important thing, that you become I would say that the lessons that I liked the most were the ones with the teachers that were more passionate about what they taught. So it was not a matter of what was taught in a sense, but it was more how it was taught. And this is a thing that I recognized when I was, for example, in the middle school or in the high school or even at university. So even though I decided to study all that I had to study, so for example, at university for all the examinations, I still can feel the difference when a teacher actually teaches you something that comes out of his own soul. And that's the main difference. And when I was at the elementary school, so in the second 7-year cycle, I had this feeling very strong in me. So I could not tell what it was at the time, but at the same time, I could recognize that there was something different that I could follow actually. So probably because I was more into feeling at the time, I was in tune with the teachers that could actually bring feeling into teaching. And so that's what I remember the most.
Yeah, you. I think that I agree with you, because when we went to school and the teacher is and the teacher are saying something, we can feel that passion, right? That they feel happy with, and they feel connected with the things that they are saying.
Yes. They feel that the things that they are teaching have a place to go, which is the pupil, which is the soul of the pupil. So there is this belonging to what you are being taught as a pupil and what the teacher teaches to the pupil. So there is this exchange of feeling and of soul, of course, and knowledge as well, because knowledge comes into this as well. But the first thing is that if the teacher has this teaching that is transmitting into his own life, into his own soul.
Yeah, that's right. And that's really thankful for.
Yes. Yeah, and you have very special memories about those teachers. They become something close to heroes, or ideals. So I remember this, for example, for my biology teacher in at the high school, because she had this passion for biology, and she could actually communicate this passion by giving her own examples. So she was not following just a textbook, but she was also giving out like uh, researches that she made. So you felt that there was enthusiasm in what she did,
Mhm.
and that she was into biology even outside of the school. So it's something that I remember, yeah, very strongly.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. And now that you mentioned your teachers, we want to know if somehow your work are influenced for two teachers that you mentioned in your biography, Fausta and Michael.
And so Fausta is actually the biology teacher. So that's the teacher that I mentioned before. So that's what I remember, and I already decided before the going to the elementary school. So I was around 5 years old, that I wanted to study natural sciences. So that's what I decided, because that was what I was into. So nature and the stories of nature. But once I was at the high school, it was like a confirmation to find someone that would actually give this enthusiasm into biology, into natural sciences. And then when I was at University of Natural Sciences in Genoa, I met Michele Sarà, who was basically, it was my tutor for my thesis, for my 3 years course thesis. And at the time, I did not know, but a little bit later, I discovered that he was an anthroposophist. And I had an interest into esotericism before, because I had also a very good teacher of Latin, that she was into alchemy and the medieval mystics. So she introduced me into this kind of thinking. But at the same time, it was not structured. It was not something that, it was something rather an interest, but still not something that I would follow from beginning to end. It was still something that I would feel more than know. While I was at the university, I met Michele Sarà, and after speaking to him about my essay, so I had to write an essay on Ernst Haeckel and his evolutionary view of the world. Basically, I mentioned to him Steiner without knowing that he was an anthroposophist. And so then after this dialogue about the thesis, he invited me to a study group that he had about Rudolf Steiner. And so that's when I began to study in a structured way, so following all the main books by Steiner, and then all many cycle of lectures. So that's how it began, actually. And I remember him very clearly, because he could actually unite natural sciences and spiritual science. And so that was at the beginning of university my ideal. So I understood that there was a way to connect my knowledge of nature given by natural sciences with my feeling that I had as a child of a mystical unity with nature and the earth. And so he taught me actually that there was a way to merge, to unite these two streams into one. And the answer was natural science together with spiritual science and anthroposophy.
Well, you just say something that I really feel too, that uh, somehow I feel like what Rudolf Steiner say or wrote, uh, I never hear about what I already understand inside of me. and that's why I connect with, because say, and I thought that it there all the people can understand what Rudolf Steiner said and feel like truth, because that's what it feels inside. I know.
I recall that when I first started to study Steiner, so it was the Gospel of Luke cycle of lectures, I remember that even though I could not remember everything, or at the same time follow all what was going on, I could still recognize the essence of what was said into me. So it was a very strong feeling of recognition and remembrance. So there was something that was evoked in me as a remembrance more than anything else. So even though later came the more cognitive and intellectual aspect, so that I could remember what it was saying and that I could relate to the way it was said. But the first impression that I had was an impression of remembrance, so of memory, that came very strongly into me, and I could relate to that because of a memory. So that's a thing that I agree with you. It's something that really you can relate to because you recognize it into yourself.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Can we talk about your work,
Mm-hmm.
your seminars, your blog,
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
anthropophysical activities?
Basically, when it all started when I was in London, so it was in 2009, 2010. So it was 10 years ago, actually. And I was there to study at the Imperial College for an MSc in evolutionary biology. And I started to think that there was something missing in the way I would have liked to, to communicate with the world. And so one day I decided to set up a blog. And so at first it was more personal. And then after some posts about anthroposophy, I understood that the people wanted to hear more about the way I was being, I got into anthroposophy at first, and then how I could bring it to, to the Italian public. And so basically, many started to read the blog because they found explanations of what they could not understand by reading the books by Steiner. And so of course, I always tell the people to go and read the actual books, but at the same time, they use the blog posts, especially now, as a sort of guide to understand the various themes that Steiner bring into anthroposophy. So I basically focus my blog activity into giving a sort of synthetic explanation of the great themes of anthroposophy. And I also translated it into English, and with the help of the readers as well. So it was a joint effort that we did last summer. And so they are also available in English. And the various blog posts have a certain theme. So it has a theme, for example, the bodies, so the occult constitution of man, or the angelic hierarchies, and so on. And there is a general overview of the theme based on Steiner's lectures and books. So people can actually connect to that because they use it as a guide. That's what it is. And after that, I started to give seminars in anthroposophical centers in Italy, and also lectures, of course, in anthroposophical centers as well, and also in Waldorf schools. And then this thing grew and grew, and during the last year, I started also to give seminars as online seminars. So it now, many, because of the lockdown and because of the situation, many need to connect with anthroposophy in a way that it's not a physical center to go. Like they have this need of communicating anthroposophy and exchanging ideas about anthroposophy, but they still need to be at home. And so to gather people together from all over Italy and even beyond Italy, me and a friend, Antonio, who has a project called Opera Omni Online, decided to bring the seminars as online seminars, with the promise, of course, that once we can meet, we will be able to organize the same seminars or the follow-up of these seminars into anthroposophical centers, so that there is an exchange and an interplay between, you know, an online community and a physical community that can actually meet. So I think this is very important to keep this balance. Otherwise, you risk to go into completely into the virtual, into something that actually has no human touch to it. So it is very important to humanize and to bring the human element of the soul into the online world. And that's because we have to be very aware of the means we use and how we use them. So, for example, the social media. So in this way, we use the social media to gather people interested into anthroposophy, and to it was an answer to a question that I was asked very much during the last years. So please do online seminars about this, about that, and so on, about the themes. So I started to answer to those questions by giving the seminars not only physically but also online. And that's it. So basically that's my more public, let's say, open work. And then there is an individual work that I do with individual people, and it is biographical work. So I'm also a counselor. So basically I use counseling techniques in the context of spiritual science and anthroposophy. So basically biography work through counseling. So basically, most of the people, again, I see them online, but whenever I travel to go into the various places in Italy, I also meet them personally in order to connect with them physically, like as a physical presence. And so I think this is, again, very important to keep this balance, and to always recognize that even though you have a screen in front of you, there is a soul from one side and one other soul to the other. So biography work works even in this way, but of course it would be better if we could actually meet in a physical place. But for the moment, it works, so it's good.
Okay. Let me see what the other questions. I want to talk about your books, because there are a lot of them, and you're so young, and I really feel so interested about how was the born of your first book?
Okay, my first book was a novel, actually, but it was published after, like years after, and it was published thanks to crowdfunding, and it's called The Book of Gaia, which is actually a fantasy talking about a living Earth. So in a sense, it's the way I experienced the Earth when I was a kid that is giving life into a novel. And it's a fantasy novel, and it's entirely based on anthroposophy as well. So there is this way of describing anthroposophical imagination through a fantasy novel. So that was the first book that I wrote. But it was published after other two books that I published. And one is a study about Kabbalah and anthroposophy, so how these two relate. and it's basically a sort of encyclopedia, let's say, or vocabulary, one can say as well, to allow anthroposophists and those interested into the Kabbalah to relate to each other in terms of terminology. So the terminology and nomenclature of one another are related, and there is also an anthroposophical explanation of Kabbalah, and at the same time, how they can actually empower each other in a way. Because also Steiner actually refer in several instances to Kabbalah, and they are very important ones actually, and they are actually given at the start of the book as the foundation of the whole work. So that was one. And the second one was in the blog, at some point, I started to comment the cycle of the year with the festivals of the year. So both pagan, so-called pagan festivals, and Christian festivals, which actually most of the time have a deep relation. So in an anthroposophical light. So I gave basically an interpretation, anthroposophical interpretation of all the cycle of the year and the festival, the main festivals. And out of that work, there was particularly one, like a series of posts about Christmas. And so the people wanted to follow the 13 Holy Nights through the process that I gave through the blog posts of the commentary of the anthroposophical commentary of the festivals. And so I transformed some of these blog posts into a book by expanding them and connecting them and so on. And so this little book is called The 13 Holy Nights and the Anthroposophical Christmas. And it's basically a guide, a meditational guide through the time of Advent, with the 4 weeks of Advent, and the 13 Holy Nights, and all the symbols of Christmas explained in an anthroposophical way, based on Steiner's insights. So that was that is the last book. And then I self-published other ebooks about especially my activity as a counselor, naturopath, and basically they're going to be out in a published form, like in a physical form at some point, but for now I'm still working on them. So I use the self-publishing as a sort of experiment, let's say, in order to give what I've been asked, like, can you write a book about this, for example? Can you gather your blog posts into one single book? But then once I need to print a book, to have the book published in print, I need again to work again this text. So for now, I would say that the finished books are just these three, okay? The Book of Gaia, Kabbalah and Anthroposophy, and the 13 Holy Nights. The others can be considered as sort of experiment that will become books, of course, in time.
Like Mizraim is an experiment.
That is a particular story, let's say, because it was published in a printed form. But then I discovered so much more about this historical matter. So it's an historical research. So basically it is, first it was published in printed form, but then I discovered that there was more, and so I wanted to create a second version. So at this point, there is just the ebook, but it's like greatly expanded in comparison to the first version. And so there is so much more into it, and I'm still working on it. So again, I use self-publication as a sort of experiment in order to get to the final version of the book. And in this case, it was basically was needed to give more historical information and historical references, because the matter is somehow a forgotten one. And so not many people know that Steiner, in the inner, basically the inner core of the anthroposophy, first the esoteric section of the Theosophical Society in Germany, and then what was the anthroposophical society, had as its inner core this this it was called the Mizraim service. And the Mizraim service is basically a service to the spiritual world in a ceremonial form. And this part of Steiner's activity is always forgotten because many people are not used anymore to this kind of activity, which is close somehow to both Freemasonry and to what we know about the church, so to the sacraments and to the Holy Mass. So basically, this was the core of Steiner's activity. And since, especially in Italy, there was no way into which one could actually access those parts, those aspects of Steiner's life, I decided to write a new book about that. And that's how the history of the Mizraim service came to be. So I think it's very important because that being the core is actually the way Steiner decided that it was the best way in which to connect what was spiritual with what it was material. So again, it is basically the heart, the very beating heart of all Steiner's activity. And the people at that time, there were 600 members in the Mizraim service around 1914. So it was around the beginning of the First World War. And basically at that time, there were 600 members, and all the members were so much enthusiastic about what was going on, because they could feel actually that they were doing something to connect with the spiritual world, and they could bring this enthusiasm into their own everyday life. So that's why I decided that was something that had not to be forgotten, and that we always have to remember that in the end, we need to act in order to experience the spirit into everyday life.
Yeah. But you need to experiment, no?
Yes, yes, you need to experiment. And actually, I always say that if we want spiritual science to be scientific, we need to have initiatives, or we can call them experiments.
Yeah.
So some of these initiatives or experiments may not be may not be the best. So in the beginning, we may even make mistakes, but then by doing this, by having these initiatives that can be actually taken up by the spiritual world or not, we learn how to develop a connection with the spiritual world. So even Steiner had many initiatives that actually failed in a sense, but he kept trying to give new initiatives in order to give an answer to the questions of the people that were around him, and also to interpret the questions that came from the spiritual world. So basically, it's always it requires always a self-conscious presence to bring the spiritual into the material. And we need to be conscious that our initiatives may fail, but we can actually again give another initiative, worked in another way, and then it might be actually the one that was needed. Maybe it's just maybe we cannot understand at first what is needed, but then after tries we can actually understand that. So that's life again.
Yeah. 2 weeks ago, I interviewed a minister of Japanese religion, because that religion has a lot of common with the Rudolf Steiner teach. And now that you mentioned Kabbalah and that you mentioned other philosophies, I feel like in the world followed the truth and spread all around the world, and now the persons that we call the masters show to the persons who has around that wisdom, and we call in different ways with different names, but are the same. That's one truth or not?
This is a very complex question, because in a sense it is true. So in a sense the spiritual world is one, but of course, and so even we perceive it as a multitude of state of being and states of consciousness, it's still one. And it's in a way we can say that it's our limited perception that gives us this impression that the spiritual world is a multitude. Okay, so in a way it's one, but at the same time we can conceive it as formed by layers, by these stages of consciousnesses and stages of being, and at the same time of regions. So these regions, these stages of consciousness and stages of being are populated by spiritual beings. And so several religious, spiritual, and esoteric streams in the world talk about basically some of these beings or some of these regions, some of these beings and states of consciousness. So in a sense, it is true that if we compare, for example, several religious and esoteric systems, we can find references to one another, and actually they talk about the same beings in different words. That's true. But at the same time, we have to understand that it is only by a comprehensive view of several cultural systems, several esoteric systems, we can get to a more complete picture. And that's actually what Steiner did. So basically, it took all or many, like the most important streams, esoteric, spiritual, and religious streams of the past, so before actually what we call spiritual science came into being, and gave a new explanation about that is adapted to the life of the people of that time and place. So in a sense, we can find truth in all religious systems. And actually spiritual science can allow us to get to the truth in any religious system, spiritual system. But at the same time, we have to consider that since these systems came into being in a specific time and place and cultural context, they are somehow partial. So once we get a comprehensive view of, for example, of the religious systems of the East and West, then when we put them together and we remove the parts that actually are connected to the outer shells of these systems, we get to the single truth that you were actually referencing. And spiritual science can allow us to get to the very essence of any spiritual system. So of course, for example, in Japan, there is Shintoism, and Shintoism is, and also Buddhism, but Shintoism is the original form of Japanese spirituality. And Shintoism is all about what we call the gods and the elementary beings. So they have a very extensive knowledge of what is, for example, the nature beings, and also what is about the gods of nature, as well as the connection with the dead, for example. So in that case, in that particular case, we find that in a very specific way. But for example, if we want to study self-consciousness and how the human being is a vehicle for self-consciousness and the unity in self-consciousness, then we have to move towards the West, towards the spiritual systems of the West. For example, we see this beginning in the Hebrew religion and in Kabbalah, and then even more, it becomes even more evident the more we go into Christianity. But at the same time, we don't have to confuse the fact that religions are something that are tied also to a development. So even the religions develop as beings. And so in a sense, we have always to be conscious that when we study religion, we need to understand at what stage of development is that religion. And so by being human beings in a cosmopolitan world, we need to get to know and to get to relate to all religious systems, recognize that there is truth in all religious systems, at the same time understanding that actually now the way that if we want to really connect in this way, we need to be scientific. So we need this objectivity in a sense, even though you belong to a specific culture that has a specific religion. So I think this is very important, and this allows us to connect even more with any other person from any other religion.
I told you that you are so young too many times, and I think that that is good for the anthroposophy, because your mind is a little bit free, and you experiment, you investigate, you are dedicate your time to know more. And I think that you can do that. The anthroposophy keep moving to an evolution, and that's important, because I know a lot of people who study anthroposophy and stay with that books and don't want to move on to another part. And it's like that people feel a little are afraid of to, how do you say, abandon the knowledge place.
Yes.
And that's why I think that the things that you do are so important. And I want to invite to, I don't know, more people like you. I don't know if there are in the world a lot of young people who are investigating or who are working for that.
Well, I think so, but at the same time, I agree with you in a sense that the book somehow, while we read the book, we are completely absorbed if we actually are interested into what we're reading. And if the book captivates us into the images that evokes in us, we are completely absorbed into the book. And somehow there is a one-to-one relationship between us reading and the book. But in this way, on one side, it becomes like an escape, like an escapism. So we escape into the book because we don't like very much what we experience in reality. And that is a very dangerous, because it's a luciferic danger to be outside of reality. And on the other side, it makes us more selfish, because in a way we can relate to the things in the book, but we are not actually sharing the same thing, the same experience with others.
Yeah.
So we just keep the knowledge and the experience for us, and that is selfish, and that is again a luciferic aspect of what we do. So while it is absolutely necessary to study alone, it is also very important to come together with other people with the same interest to share the experience and the knowledge and the questions that are even more important that we have about what we have read and we have experienced. So there is always something new coming up by the questions that arise by the exchange into a group of people. And in this community, this sense of community can actually arise the right initiative that I was talking before. So an initiative that can be accepted by the spiritual world and that can actually bring fruit over the earth. So in one sense, it needs courage to come out of the book, of reading the book, and do something. But it's very important, and the first, probably the first step into doing something is meditation. When we start to meditate, we actually pass from something that it's theoretical to something that it's practical. And from that practice, many questions will arise, even more than when we read a book. And when we have these practical questions, we are moved to ask to someone that is on the same path, but maybe since a longer time. And so it can actually give some answers to what to our questions. And at the same time, new questions can arise to bring the both of them. So even the one that is further along the path, even further. So in the gospel, it is said that when one or two are united in my name, I am amongst them. So the Christ is amongst those that unite in the communal spirit, in the spirit of community. And that is very extremely important, because the I am, the Christ, self-consciousness can only be present when I am in relation to the other person. And that is what it's all about. Anthroposophy, spiritual science cannot be cultivated only alone. Otherwise, it becomes very selfish. And as anything that we cultivate all alone, in the end, it removes us from reality. And that is actually, we have to go into reality and transform reality with enthusiasm.
And a little bird told me that you are researching also about the dreams and the things that we dream. I remember that I just read a book, something about that when Rudolf Steiner said that we also dream when we are wake up.
Yes.
And that's something that I really shocked, because I remember that once in Mexico, I was watching the TV, and then my mother came, and I moved my eyes because I want to see my mother. And in that moment, also just the moment that I move my eyes in this little bit of space, I saw something that in Mexico are going to be an earthquake.
Okay.
And that night we experiment an earthquake. Mm-hmm. But that's really that make me feel so weird, because I never experiment that. I don't know why that came to me. I don't know. I didn't do anything to create that moment. I mean, I don't pray anything. I don't feel anything different. I mean, my life is normal, and I saw that. And when I read that the Rudolf Steiner say that, I want to know more about that. And at this point, I don't meet any person who can tell me something about something about the dreams, the importance of our dreams. Because now I consider that they are so important into our lives.
They are, because dreams are actually the first-hand experience that we can have of another world, which is the astral world. So basically, once we pass over into sleeping, our consciousness can either experience basically the dream, or pass into a non-dreaming experience. So it's even deeper at that point. But this transition between consciousness and this deeper consciousness without dreams, so this astral world, is basically composed by images. And when we traverse during the sleep, this astral world, we are interwoven. The images come into us, and we experience these images as dreams. So dreams have particular properties. For example, they have no set time or place. So time and place, time and space can be actually for us, for our experience of, you know, everyday life, they are completely torn apart. So you can experience past, present, and future in the same time, in the same image, and at the same time be in two places. So this is the first experience that we can have of something that is completely super sensible. Only the image that we attach to this experience can come from the sensible, for example, from the images of everyday life. But at the same time, the way we experience these images is not physical. So this is why it's very important. So we have to remember and understand that dreams have different qualities. So some dreams are more tied to the physical senses, physical body, and others are more into the soul, spiritual. So, for example, that when we are ill, when we have, for example, fever, we have certain type of dreams, as well as, for example, when we eat a lot. Okay, so when we eat very heavy foods, we have certain dreams. And these two type of dreams, when we are ill and when we eat food, are more tied to the processes of, on one side, of healing, for example, for fever, or of digestion in the case of food, than to anything else. So the quality of these dreams is different, and the meaning that is attached to the images is different. But when we have very highly symbolic dreams, that's when we are completely immersed into the astral world. And that's when, because the astral world is actually composed by symbolic images, or that's how we perceive them. So basically, when we have these dreams that somehow seem like a story that we set up by ourselves, in a sense, it's like a stage where we have a play with all the characters and this strange perception of time and space, then we know that these are soul dreams. Then there are other dreams, that is the third special quality that dreams can have, is that when we feel that we are completely self-conscious in a dream, and somehow that what happens is objective. So in that case, when we experience this self-consciousness in dreams and this objectivity, it's like a remembrance of something. These are spiritual dreams, because these are tied to our, basically our experience of past lives and of our being conscious into past lives. So these are the three main types of dreams. So these dreams about precognition, or the foretelling of events, are soul spiritual, because they are on the border of something that is symbolic in a sense, or perception that allow us to understand there is something going on, even though it's not apparent, and then this happens in reality. So these are connected to the higher parts of the soul that can actually expand our sphere of consciousness into super sensible senses. So they are not tied directly to our outward senses, like sight and smell and touch and so on, but they are tied to inner soul senses. And so it happens especially when we are kids, because in a way we are more cosmic than earthly. And so it's easier for us to connect to cosmic aspects of connection between things than to our earthly, everyday, waking consciousness as we are when we are adults after 21, 28 years, when the I is actually seated into the soul. So basically, it's very important to, for example, to keep a diary, notes about our dreams, especially the ones that strikes us the most, because in those there are meanings and messages that actually relate to facts of our own mysteries in life, our own enigmas of life. And we, even though we can understand them somehow and even give interpretations, we will understand them once we experience what the dream is about in life. And if we keep these notes and diary, of this dream diary, we can actually become self-aware when the process that is described into symbolic images into the dream is becoming true, is becoming a reality in our world. So that is very interesting and very important to keep as well in biographical work.
Okay. Yeah, I dream with a girlfriend, with a friend who was pregnant, and I dream the date what he's going his boy are going to born. And I remember the date because I never dream with dates, and that was the number and the month, and they the people who's been in my dreams say the date, and I wake up and call my friend and told her.
Yes.
And that kind of dreams that I used to have, and that's why I think that they are so important for our lives. But when I read that Rudolf Steiner said that also when we are awake with our eyes open can dream, I mean.
Yes, we can, but actually in this case we need to wake up in a sense, because once we are awake and we believe we are awake, we are constantly somehow, especially if we have a routinary life, so if our life is it's very similar one day to another, we tend to fall into a semi-waking consciousness. So it's between dream and waking consciousness. And that is actually something that we need to avoid, because we have to dream, we have to cultivate our dream life while we sleep, but we have to be very awake during the day. So we have to be self-conscious and strive to be present in every single moment, because that is how we can actually spiritualize those same moments. While if we are still into this type of dream and waking state, this sort of in-between state, we cannot actually fully experience the moment that we live in that at that time, in that place. This is also something that happens a lot because of our continuous exposition, continuous fruition, for example, of images, like movies, like the videos, and images can come to us through the internet, through phones, and so on. This continuous watching of images, which are created out of an artificial intelligence, take man, like take the self-consciousness of man into a dreaming, waking state, in this in-between state. And this is very dangerous, because messages that are embedded into the images themselves can actually enter the human being without being aware of what is going on. And that is very something that is happening a lot, for example, with advertisement, where actually messages are continuously sent into the human being. Like, for example, you need to buy this. This is the most common, for example, by using an image, a symbolic image. And only if we are very strongly aware of what is going on, if we are very present, we can actually push what is not needed out of our soul. Otherwise, we can actually be burdened by these images and by these messages that come through the image itself. So it's very important. And we see a lot that people are constantly watching their phone, and they are not really there. They are not really experiencing what is around them, what is life.
Yeah. That's too much common right now.
And it's very hard to, because it's enticing, because these images are somehow very captivating and interesting and beautiful. And even the activities that are proposed, for example, through the social medias and the apps, are actually engaging. They are designed to be engaging. And so you need a very strong free will to exercise this free will to do away with what is not needed. But once you do that, you actually acquire forces for the soul that allow you to control these means. So it's not that we have to do completely away with the internet or with phones and with computers and so on. On the contrary, we have to use them because they are part of our culture, part of our evolution, but we don't have to be controlled by them. We need to use them for the greater good. And so, for example, that's how we thought from the beginning about giving anthroposophical seminars over the internet. We can gather people from different places and all over Italy, all over Europe, and even the world. But at the same time, we need to pass this message that that is only a means. It's not the end in itself. And so you need to actually bring this knowledge out into experience through the enthusiasm that is created by gaining this knowledge. And so I think that is very important as well, because we are using this means and we will be on YouTube soon. So
yeah, and we can meet you because otherwise we can never meet.
yes, of course, but it's incredible. I mean, the technology is really becoming, it's really getting to the border of magical,
Yeah.
but we need to be in control.
Yeah.
Technology has to be in something that allows the human being to be more into connection with the others, not the contrary. Technology has to be a means and not an end.
Yeah, that's right. We have to fight for our freedom and start to enjoy the company.
Yes. Yes, exactly. And to be aware of what is happening around us, to be interested into reality.
Yeah, that's important. We can forget to see the sky, the stars, and listen the birds and all stuff that are magical too. And
of course,
they are food for our soul, like you
they are
said.
food for our souls, yes. And actually, you know, even psychology understands, like, you know, a natural scientific psychology. So if we go into the academia of psychology, recognizes that the like an extreme use or a continuous use of the computer, of the phone especially, and of social media can create anxiety. So actually it destroys, it makes our soul to be thirsty and hungry. So it removes forces from our soul. So we always have to be aware that while we do something, we always have another human being on the other side receiving something, and this human being wants to connect with us. So be present in the connection that we create through technology.
Yeah. You study about the angels.
Yes.
And
Yes.
and the demons too.
Yeah, of course. Yes.
And I want to say that we love to hear about the angels, and we don't really like to hear about the other side. So do you think that it's important to know the two sides of the coin?
Yes, it's very important to know both, because in a sense they are, as you said, two sides of a coin. And even demons are actually fallen angels. So basically, they are spiritual beings as well. They are, in a sense, way more powerful than we are. So they can actually, they are not bound to space and time, for example. So they are in a constant state of consciousness where the human being finds himself, for example, as we said before, in dreams or even in higher stages of consciousness. But at the same time, in our culture, especially in our technological world, we need to be aware that evil is a force, and that evil is composed by beings. And these beings want something from the human being. So it's only by relating to the fact that we can actually relate to a being of, representing something, a force into reality, we can actually enter in a healthy relationship with that force, with that being. So it's not just by knowing about the angels in a way, so about the light side, but also about the dark side, that we can find actually the balance between what is dark and what is light. So we need to be in the middle in a sense, and by doing this, we have to bring the light into the dark. So by doing this, we transform what is actually a demon, what is actually an evil force, into something very powerful that can be used to spread the light. So, for example, the first step in self-knowledge is always, I saw in the super sensible worlds actually, is always the encounter with the guardian of the threshold. And the guardian of the threshold is actually a demonic being that inhabits us. It's something in us. It's like a host that we have inside us. And so basically, this sort of guest, okay, that we have inside us, it's something that we need to know, because otherwise he wants to become us. He wants to substitute his own self with us. That's, for example, when the human being completely passes out and does, for example, things like, that we normally believe that are not possible for a human being, and maybe there are cruel and very evil acts that the human being can actually commit in a state of non-consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
That's the double, the so-called double, that is also a part of the guardian of the threshold, that it's inside us. So it's only by facing our own weaknesses, facing our own evil inside us, that we can actually do something out of this. We can transform this evil and use it for healing. Because ultimately, to transform evil, to transform our own double, so our own shadow, as Jung would say, is the only way to bring healing and the possibility of uniting the opposites that we find in reality. So it's always in the union of these opposites, in the middle, that we are able to bring healing in our life and in the life of others. So in this sense, by studying the angels and the demons, we are able to find a balance between them and to enlighten the darker side and to bring much, much more healing into our lives. So it's very important, for example, and in dreams they appear very much into several different shapes, for example, of the so-called 7 deadly vices, for example. They appear with certain images, and they teach us something about our own soul that we can actually transform and to bring into a new light.
Yeah, okay. Well, thank you so much for sharing with us a little bit of all the knowledge that you have. We really want to expect, I don't know if we can expect that your ebooks are going to translate in Spanish and we can read it.
Okay, good. Okay, let's see. The future is open, so see what happens. And if we have this image inside us, then it might come to be a reality.
Okay. Well, we hope that soon we can read it. And I don't know if you have something to say before say goodbye.
So I'm very happy I'm very happy to be here and to give this interview, really, and it has been very thorough and very personal. So that's what is great about an interview. So thank you to you, Caro, and to Daniel also, that allowed me to be here and to give this interview. So for any question, you can find me on my website, and there is a contact form. And so you connect directly with my email. So if any of the viewers have questions, then they can ask me.
It's giorgiotarditiSpagnoli.com.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, well, thank you so much for being with us. And we hope to to see you soon, but with a better English for my part.
Okay, don't worry, absolutely. There is always a way to communicate and to relate, so there is nothing to worry about. If the heart is there, there is everything.
Thank you so much. And we hope to visit soon Italy.
Oh, yeah?
Everybody say that it's gorgeous and has something special, and I can feel it, but I never visit.
Yeah, please come.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, like you say, the future is open, and I hope that once I can travel to Italy and meet you in person.
Yes, and let me know, please.
Okay, Giorgio, thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you very much, Caro. Thank you, and thank you to all the viewers of Palabra de Rudolf Steiner.
See you soon.
See you soon. See you soon.